Howdy, how you doing? It is I, your host with the most, Jai. Yeah, it's a Belize reference, But Habari Gani, if you're celebrating Kwanzaa here, then you know what day it is. It's Ujama, you know what I'm saying? Ujama, Swahili isn't all that, but still Habari Gani, my people, Habari Gani, and we got a great show. Great show that we got everything lined up during Kwanzaa week for our celebration. So it'll be really good. It'll be really good. I'm happy for it. I'm happy about the guests we have on. Real happy about that. It's just like hitting stride, hitting everything going well. But this right here is 2050 and beyond, for those who don't know, and you're tuned into the Tuesday programming. So on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. EST, we like to start sharp and quick, and we like to sort of contextualize what our subject is going to be. And that subject will be that red, black, and green, that RBG, that Pan-Africanism. And I'm pretty excited about it. But along with that, we like to contextualize and ground in historical basis, which is why I'll have my friends who know a little bit about a thing or two. They're history majors, and they try to come on a bit and sort of, help us understand what we'll be discussing before we get into our contemporary discussion, which is why the title for the show is Pan-Africanism in the Modern and Contemporary, because the modern sort of predates what we got going on in the contemporary now. And really just going to ground things a bit and sort of define, and not only define the subject, but sort of give a context around the subject. And now the family is coming in, now the family's coming in, now the family's coming in. And after we get on with what we got going on with the historical context of things, then we sort of push into what we see in the world now, and that's our contemporary discussion. And we got some great people on here, both Bison, so it's another Bison brigade, not a full house, but these are some cats that I've been talking to for quite some time, and I think that they'll bring much needed energy. So I'm really excited about this one, but I know you're also excited about something else that we have, and that right there is this affirmation from Shania.
Greetings, virtual villagers. My name is Shania, and do you know what time it is? It's affirmation time! Time to remind ourselves how great we are. So everybody, repeat after me. I am smart. I have purpose. I am confident. I am valuable. My voice is worthy of being heard. I am an asset to my family, school, and community. I respect myself and I respect others. I am beautifully made inside and out. I love my beautiful hair and I love my beautiful brown skin. I am more than enough. Great job, virtual villagers. Can I get a virtual high five? Great job. And always remember how fantastic you are.
Always remember how fantastic you are. That right there is Shania. That right there is a deep cut. So if you were with us with Clever Communities in Action for a while, then you remember Shania giving us that strong affirmation during the fall season. And here we are deep into the winter. Shania is still keeping us warm inside and out, because we always need to know that we're fantastic, amazing, and beautiful Black people. And that's why we want to start that off a little bit there. But enough about me waxing poetic a little bit. You guys came here for this discussion in a bit. And when it comes to talking about Pan-Africanism, I'm pretty excited about the sort of guys that I got today. But before we bring them on, we need to bring my brother Jody on real quick.
Hey,
how you doing, bro?
I'm doing straight. How about you?
I'm excited for tonight's show. I ain't even gonna lie to you, man.
I'm really excited. The people we got coming on today, they know a few things.
Absolutely. And but before we get into that a bit, right? we really got to discuss the history of Pan-Africanism real quick. So it's kind of weird doing that though, because like it's long standing and you can't really talk about Pan-Africanism and then like have a set date for it, because the spirit and the action of it has been going on before like it was actually sort of written down as an ideology.
That's true.
So but anyway, we'll try to get it started. So Pan-Africanism usually starts in the late 1800s. A lot of brothers from the islands with CLR James, Marcus Garvey, of course, and but oddly enough, Pan-Africanism doesn't really. The first conference is held in the year 1900 at Westminster Hall in London, and is organized in part by Henry Sylvester Williams to protest stealing of lands in the colonies, racial discrimination, and deal with other issues of interest to Black people. And then, like we said, Marcus Garvey comes in after that. Well, he's still working extensively. And for those of you who don't know, Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican brother and who kind of heralded as one of the prophets for Pan-Africanism. So big shout out to Marcus Garvey there. And okay, you know what I'm saying? We got Brennan here, you know what I'm saying? We got Eric here too. So right there, Brennan's from like the Midwest. Eric, him and his people, they're from Nigeria. So we got that in. Jody, you know, your people coming from Haiti a bit. My people coming from South Carolina. And whenever this DNA test comes out, I'll be able to expand off that some more. But yeah. So but we can talk extensively about Pan-Africanism and Marcus Garvey. But a lot of people don't know that Booker T. Washington was Garvey's mentor. And Washington sort of bankrolled and financed a lot of the early Pan-African conferences, not the congresses, because he had passed away before the congresses took off. But yeah, but he was very quiet about it, and he used a lot of his influence. And there's a good book, Booker T. Washington, the Pan-Africanist, which sort of expounds upon that a bit. And then after Garvey gets into the U.S. about a year or two after Washington passes away, he hits the ground running. He sets up shop in Harlem. The UNIA, United Negro Improvement Association, hits the ground, and they just start pumping out work. I mean, you got the Black Star Line, you got Negro World newspaper, etc., etc. All of that just enriching Black people. Dang, man, you did a lot. But for those of you who don't know, the Negro World newspaper, it was a newspaper centered in Harlem, New York, and it did cost money, which is something that a lot of Black people didn't have at any point in history. So this is how it went. And I learned this one from Dr. Carr. So shout out Dr. Carr, come on the show, please. But once someone had read the Negro World newspaper, they pass it on and circulate it, as well as these Black sailors and shipmen were, sailing around, going to these different African places and different places around the diaspora. So they take a copy of the Negro World with them, and then they pass it on. So it was a lot of word of mouth moving here. So one piece of paper could go from Harlem all the way down to South Africa, which is what they did. And it's really cool because Marcus Garvey had a lot of like white colonizers in South Africa scared, because the Black people there, they would get the Negro World after it changed so many different hands. And as it changed hands, it also got expounded upon. It was like they upped the story a little bit, and it became sort of like folklore. So they had white South Africans believe that Marcus Garvey was coming in with an armada of ships and hundreds of thousands of troops coming in to liberate the people of South Africa personally. And that right there is it's just a key facet of Pan-Africanism. It's that communalism, that communality, that sharing of resources that Ujamaa here. So even though one person bought the newspaper, they shared that information and dispersed it all around the diaspora. And that story in South Africa can be said for any place in Brazil, all the way up to Ethiopia, Kenya, and just all around. So that's a little bit about Baba Garvey. Then in 1919, W.E.B. Du Bois would hold the first Pan-African Congress in Paris, France, and advocated for the independence of African nations. Then a couple decades later, the fifth Congress, the fifth Pan-African Congress in 1945, held in Manchester, is one of the most defining moments due to numerous Africans from the continent of Africa being present. So this isn't more so a West Indies and U.S. and European Black affair. It actually has continental Africans there advocating for themselves and speaking. And then there have been a handful of Pan-African Congresses since then. And so I believe the last one around the 7th or the 8th. And really just those were held on the continent of Africa. Then we have Kwame Nkrumah in 1958, who really advocates for Pan-Africanism. And after he led independent Ghana at the time, and he sort of called a conference for other African leaders of then independent African states to recommit themselves to freeing the whole continent from the grasp of imperialism. And then Nkrumah is later deposed from his legal office in the CIA-backed coup, but was able to lead as a co-president with Sekou Touré in the country of Guinea, displaying African resilience and that Pan-Africanism once again. Then, a couple decades later, Fidel Castro sent troops to help in southern Africa, to help the Angolan troops fight the European troops there. And the reason why he did that was because many Black Cubans can trace their lineage to the Angolan region. And Castro's troops routed the European forces in one of the most devastating defeats in European history, and that weakened their overall power in the area, which then allowed Nelson Mandela to be freed from prison a couple of years later, because there wasn't that much of European militarism in the area after such an affair. So that is a very brief summary of notable Pan-African events here and there. Jody, you got anything, bro?
I think you covered the topic pretty well. I don't think you left much room to talk about anything else, but yeah.
Cool. So that right there is our brief overview of Pan-Africanism. And here's the thing. We're not even done with that. We still got a little bit more historical grounding to do. And the reason, because usually we have the Africana revolutionary portion, but we inverted it because this sister that we have going on tonight, she's definitely someone that we want to pay homage to and waltz into the conversation with her spirit backing us. So that's right. We don't even have the discussion yet because we have our Africana revolutionary coming up right after this.
Buying or selling a home doesn't have to be difficult. At the James Allen Group, we work tirelessly to get families into homes and to get our listings sold quickly at the best price. James Allen, our principal broker, has over 30 years of experience as a realtor. As a U.S. Navy veteran, his knowledge of Hampton Roads and its community is a vital tool in meeting the home buying needs of military families. If you're ready to buy or sell your home, contact the James Allen Group at 757-449-8322. Sign up today for our free home buyer or seller seminar at jamesallengroup.com.
I'm back. Did you miss me? So we had a word from our sponsors. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. That's a word from me. And if you have anything that you'd like to advertise here, remember this is Black-owned productions. This is a Black-owned advertising area as well. We like to provide a space not just for Black-owned literature to be pushed. Shout out to Sankofa Books, but also any sort of Black-owned business that you may have that you believe needs that extra revenue and that extra notoriety. Let us know. We can help you out. But like I said, we have an Africana revolutionary that we always like to kick off and support. And we had things inverted a little bit just to switch it up on you as we go through Kwanzaa. And it's none other than born Joanne Deborah Byron in New York City. So this is a brief shout out to Obi in New York. On July 16th of 1947, the ever impressive and revolutionary Assata Olugabaga Shakur is our Africana revolutionary for this week. Having moved between her birthplace of New York and Wilmington, North Carolina in early years, Miss Assata would soon settle into the North after attending the Bureau of Manhattan Community College and transferring to the City College of New York, where she'd become heavily associated with Black nationalist circles, along with other activist movements, such as the anti-Vietnam War movement and the Black liberation movements. This would lead her to travel to Oakland, California during 1970, where she'd become acquainted with the Black Panther Party for self-defense, where upon returning to New York, she joined the Harlem branch. In Harlem, she worked heavily with the Black Panther Party breakfast program until she left the group over ideological differences in 1971. It is in 1971 she would adopt a new name that we all know her by, Assata, which means she who struggles, Olubala, which means love for the people, and Shakur, which means the thankful. In 1971, Miss Shakur would join the Black Liberation Army, and a year later, in 1972, the FBI would issue a warrant for the arrest of Assata Shakur because of alleged connections between her and alleged crimes committed by the Black Liberation Army. And then on May 2nd, 1973, Assata was stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike by 2 state troopers, which resulted in the deaths of Black Liberation Army member Zaid Shakur and State Trooper Forrester. Shakur was charged with first-degree murder and went to trial 7 times, even though the gunshot wound that she'd sustained during the scuffle made her unable to fire a gun, and evidence showed that. In 1977, Shakur was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. But in 1979, she escaped from New Jersey Clinton Correctional Facility for Women with the help of her Black Liberation Army brothers and sisters. She'd eventually make her way to Cuba in 1984, where she was granted asylum ever since. 3 years later, in 1987, she would publish her world-renowned autobiography that details her experiences and illuminates her strength and will. She is still living in Cuba, where she continues her revolutionary work among the Cuban people. Salute to Mama Assata, always and forever. And now that we've got that kicked off for you, we have, drum roll please, da 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 da. We're finally going to get into these comments just a little bit. So Brennan says we definitely need Dr. Carr on here, which I definitely agree. Baba Carr, if you see this, I've sent you several emails. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna send you another one, and we'll make sure that happens. Manyang talks about, if you don't know, Manyang was on the show our second week with Black Media, and she did absolutely phenomenal. And she said that she just started reading Assata's biography today, and great work there, great work there. It needs to be on everyone's shelf. And Kimmy says, yes, sir, because we are about to get into our discussion. So I'm going to bring on this brother. He's a history major. He goes to Howard University. He's a freshman hailing from Omaha, Nebraska, but currently resides in Plantation, Florida. It is our preeminent writer, scholar, genius, in-home historian. We got, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Mr. Bullock. Now, oh man, you ready to get into this one?
Yeah, I'm definitely ready to get into this one. It's a nice little topic we got going on here.
Absolutely, man. Things are a lot different because I remember we didn't start getting into the discussion until about 30 minutes in. Now we at like below 20. So we're about to have over an hour of Pan-Africanist fun. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. So this guy we're about to bring on, you saw him last week. He couldn't get enough. And man, hailing all the way from Baltimore. Probably one of the I'm excited. It's hard to describe him because he's such an enigma. Like truly one of the geniuses of our time, if definitely our class.
Very multifaceted person we got coming on here today.
Absolutely. Makes music
talented, poetically talented.
I know, right? Like the poems, the music, the research that he gives us into, always got a project he wants to jumpstart with us. Definitely a brother who understands the spirit of working within the community for the community. I've understated him, so I'll let him come on and speak for himself. We got Solomon Brooks back.
Habari Gani, brother.
Habari Gani. Ujama, baby. Ujama. Oh, man. And my first like heavy experience with Solomon was he sent Julius Nyeri's Ujama to me, and that's when I realized that I was going to Howard and I was going like to be in like groups and circles with people who cared about Black people and knew their stuff. So this is the dude who got me to start acting right. So shout out to Solomon, man. Just like
you too, bro.
All love, man. All love. But we're not done. We're not done.
Have
you can you introduce him?
Oh, the great Pan-Africanist, Nkrumah Torres, hailing from all the way PG Moco, Maryland. We have Foley Kuevi.
Absolutely.
Hey guys.
Oh man, like How you doing, folks?
Introduction. Thank you. I appreciate it.
He's very quiet, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh man, so
Not as loud as he is on Twitter.
I know, right? I was thinking Honey would have had some stuff
About
to say.
you. I could say the same about you. So
You could. That's the truth.
Oh man, so first off, thank you guys for being on the show. Thank you guys for being on this week of the show, especially because now we have a space to sort of talk about what we talk about anyway, but in front of people. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know we were gonna have glasses on. Okay, so
Hello.
y'all quiet, bro. Like I'm talking, I'm hyping y'all up. I'm sitting here thinking this is
time. I mean,
Yo, you know what? If I want an interview, I'm gonna get Don Royer back on here because this is not what I was expecting. So to sort of start things off, right? We're speaking on Pan-Africanism, and for those of you who don't know, Pan-Africanism is a really simple concept that is scary to a lot of people, especially a lot of people in Europe. It's the simple ideology of African people all over the diaspora, all over the world, uniting for the common benefit of African people and to make sure that our material needs are satisfied, met, and that men, women, children, non-binary folk, and everyone else in between can live a life that is away from European domination, and also making sure that African people are no longer dependent on Europeans or the West as a whole. Was that a definition that we find working with? Anything we need to tweak?
now I think you hit it on the spot.
All right,
I would say it is grounded in socialism, so Torre would say so.
Okay, okay.
Since we're very communal people.
Okay. So Foley brings in the economics, Ujama, Apit, and there is the scientific socialism branch of Pan-Africanism that Nkrumah Toureism, that Kwame Ture preached about heavily with the APRP, All African People's Revolutionary Party. And there we go. I'm gonna match Foley. Dang, I can see. All right, cool. So I gotta fix that a little bit. Now that we've gotten that sort of off the ground here, and we understand that Pan-Africanism is an ideology that affirms all Black people, and we can sort of get into this. So it is Kwanzaa. We're talking about group economics today. It is Ujama Day. I'm just so happy and excited for everyone to be here. Just looking at Jody, just looking at Foley, looking at Solomon. This makes me smile. This makes me feel real good, man. Because basically, first question would be, how do we see Pan-Africanism sort of acted upon, or how do we see actions of Pan-Africanism in our current sphere as Howard University students?
Can you repeat that? Oh wait, fully got it.
Oh, because I was gonna say, like, being at Howard, you're exposed to different sort of Black people from all over the diaspora and on the continent. So you're constantly meeting and talking to people and sharing your experiences and finding commonality within each other all the time. I mean, it would be better to be on campus so you can really be more in touch with people, but I think social media has really helped in terms of strengthening that sort of connection between each other. So, I mean, that would be my experience too.
Sure enough. Anyone else? Really?
I didn't really get the whole question, so.
Oh, why you ain't just say that? Oh.
No, I was going to say it, but then Foley went on his answer, so I was like, I'm gonna let him speak.
So, how have we seen actions of Pan-Africanism as Howard students, sort of getting that HBCU, scope so far, even though things are virtual?
I feel like the mere choice to attend an HBCU is Pan-African in itself, because, right, as African Americans, or we're not all African American, but inherently we're African anyway, so it's not like the distinctions really matter. But we all made the choice to be in an inherently African Black space, rather than, you know, in some other institution where, you know, there's hardly any African people there, or any other institution where, you know, you just don't see a lot of Black people. So it is kind of similar to the concept of Pan-Africanism in the sense that, okay, yeah, this is a space where we're unifying Black people from all over the country. And I know that, like, basically what's been said a lot by Black people living in the United States, African people in America, is that whenever you travel around the country, there are Black pockets of each state, each city, with distinct African American cultures. So when we all make the choice to go to an HBCU, it's kind of like those cultures diverging. So it's just like, you know, basically HBCUs are kind of like little Africa, you feel me? So there's that.
Yeah, like if y'all have ever been to Howard, if y'all have ever been to the yard, I think there's a Pan-African flag right in the middle of it. But I guess in action, one of the major things we've seen ourselves, at least in our virtual communities, for at least Twitter this year, contextualizing police brutality as a global issue in terms of like in May with George Floyd protests, and then later when everybody was protesting SARS together in an act of, you know, solidarity, that we can all identify our oppression. That's like a really good start, you know.
Okay. So understanding that the virtual medium we have, and we've seen it time and time again, recently with the Anglophone crisis that went viral. There was the SARS movement that went viral. Congo's bleeding, which went viral time and time again. Also, just police brutality in America. And we saw Pan-Africanism exhibited when the African Union, which some of us may have reservations about, but they issued a statement to the UN pressing the American government to answer for their crimes on police brutality. And we did speak on Asada, and we spoke on Castro and his help in, you know, Angola. So we understand that Cuba is, you know, a part of the Pan-Africanist movement as well. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up was because, Brody, you was talking about how there should be a program for HBCUs and African universities to sort of have exchanges. And I thought you was going to run away with it, but you was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So thanks for letting me lead that in. But
All right.
could you just like explain a bit about what you plan to see?
Basically, if it were to be implemented, what I would like for it to be, or just because the entire concept behind the idea of having like an African university / HBCU foreign exchange program was to basically see that Black people. Okay, let me bring it back. Let me contextualize it like in a global context. The global context is what Black Americans see of the continent, which is Africa, is typically the picture that the Western media paints of Africa, which is basically shrouded in poverty porn and just white saviorism too, because, you know, they send like the missionaries over like under the guise of helping. You just see a bunch of struggle and not a lot of culture when this picture of Africa is painted. And then on the other end, you see African people. They also see of African Americans the picture that is painted of them by Western media as well. So it's basically just like this double-sided thing, whereas like the groups that are being talked about aren't really painting a picture of themselves to present to the other people. Rather, a lot of white people are just taking the images that they perceive these Black people to be and just presenting them to, you know, one or the other. Oh, it's okay. They're presenting them to the other. So basically, to combat all the diaspora wars, and just so like Black people in America and African people in Africa just have a better sense of themselves and a better sense of their Blackness, have them travel to these other communities that they haven't seen and just get a sense of connection with their people and learn more about themselves. Because also it's very customary for students, not even just Black students, to want to go and study in some very obscure European country, or go study at Oxford, or go study somewhere like that has this just perceived prestige about them, when really that's just taking away from, you know, the entire like culture, the intellect, just everything that's been built in Africa itself. So if you know you send just a black student in America to the University of Ghana or to the University of Cape Town or just the University of Johannesburg, they can witness all of that. They can witness a lot of the brilliance that goes on in these communities. And then the other way around, you know, if a student is Ghanaian, they can go up to Howard University and they can see the brilliance that goes on there. So that's kind of the idea behind the concept. And I think that it'd be nice. I would personally partake with it if we had a program like that. And I'm pretty sure the rest of the three of you would also like partake in that because.
Okay, so you said that you were taking it. Where would you go?
Right now, I'm looking at the University of Cape Town, but also seeing because this is something that I didn't really emphasize, but also this wouldn't just include like African universities. It would also include just universities in places around the diaspora. So in the Caribbean, where there's a large pocket of black people, probably in Brazil, where there's also a very large pocket of black people. What I would personally either go to the University of Cape Town because that's the design capital and just the entire city is beautiful there, or I'd go to the University of Haiti because I want to walk like on the, you know, sands and deserts that my people walked on, you know. So it's like,
You said deserts?
ain't no deserts.
You meant beaches?
Deserts in Haiti. Ain't no deserts in Haiti. I'm
You
tripping.
said the sands and deserts.
Why are you trying to catch him up?
What Solo say?
I was like, I was just to Jaimir. Why are you trying to catch Jody lacking?
I got myself like nothing on him.
In the event that there are any like Haitian folk out there who are watching it and they want to like fellowship with us, and we talking about Haitian deserts,
Oh no.
I need to correct that before.
Exactly. Nah, it's good that he pointed it out. But also, hold up.
What do you got going? Oh, okay. Okay.
Of course.
Yeah, what?
Of course.
Boy, pull the flag out. Hey.
Absolutely. Let them know.
Hold up.
You got more?
Nah.
Match. Okay.
All have the same bandana with it, bro. I swear. Like, how you know I'm Haitian?
I had no idea Jody was Haitian, bro. He just. Speaking of flags, Foley, I see what you got back there.
Oh, that's the flag of Barbados. Yeah.
He said,
He said,
I forgot. I don't even know. Because I forgot to. But yeah, I should be getting a Ghana flag somewhere. But
so
yeah.
you getting another one.
Another one. Okay. So since we on the subject of Foley, if so this program of, you know, being able to study at any predominantly black university in the diaspora would be offered to you, which country would you choose?
Ghana. I think I just want to go back.
Because that boy Ghanaian.
Yeah. I just want to go back home. Or, you know, maybe somewhere across the Caribbean. I think it would be nice. Yeah. Or maybe Cape Town. Cape Town.
Okay, so y'all trying to link in Cape Town. And then Solomon, you know, where would you want to go across the diaspora to learn about?
Probably anywhere in the general, like West Africa. Like Jody said, Cape Town. Or
in South Africa, my man.
No. It said or like you said.
Oh,
hey, I was confused too because I was like, that is the tip. But all right.
Yeah, I'm not that bad at geography.
Yeah.
But yeah, anywhere in the diaspora would be fine. Anywhere,
I'm going anywhere. It don't matter where. Just like sign me up, black people. You already know what it is.
Black Pride worldwide.
They gonna send Buddy to Detroit, bro. You should have been.
Wayne State University.
All right, cool. So we spoke a little bit about like just the intellectual energy and synergy that we can have. All right, so James mentioned Nigeria. Howard has a lot of Nigerians like everywhere now. Eric, who is Nigerian, mentioned going to Mali, and speaking of Mali, they had a militaristic coup a couple weeks back,
A
and
couple weeks.
yeah, a couple weeks back. I think it was like, y'all heard about it?
And I heard where they were setting up something like that, but I don't think I should put it.
Yeah, it was a coup. They overthrew the government, so we'll see how that pans out.
Good for them.
Coups. I mean, they work sometimes with Sankara. You gonna tell me that didn't work?
Like, I don't think it's a wonderful thing for him to work, like most of the time, depending on who's like staging it. Like,
I mean, we're supposed to be having one right now in the U.S., and
It's
Hey, J. Edgar Hoover's ghost is watching me right now, so I would choose the words very carefully.
bro, I'm covered by like my Haitian brother right here. I'm not worried, okay?
I mean, in terms of like the political system in America, I think you can touch on that with Pan-Africanism, saying that the American political system doesn't truly work for us in a sense that you go into the system. I'm saying there's some black people who go into the system who think that they can truly change it from the inside out, and that if I can get enough votes, and since I'm black, I can do all this work for black people, and they get inside, they rally up the votes, they get voted in, and they go up to Capitol Hill, and they start realizing that they're surrounded by all these other people in the party who are getting stuff done, but they're getting stuff done in a meaningful way that is because they're established. So they go deeper within the rabbit hole and they become established themselves. And as time goes on, they lose focus of what their work is supposed to do for them. So you also have some opportunistic people who use the trauma and the pain of black people to elevate their own selves. And then it kind of makes it harder for the people to truly see who's for them. But even within this system, it's people stepping on us to elevate themselves, or people who go in with great intentions and they stay in by becoming absolved and conforming to the whole system, and then just lose focus. If anybody wants to add on to
Okay. So basically, it sounds like you should have been here last week, so you want to talk about like black people in electoral politics. Cool, but it's funny that you mentioned that because it's not just like it's not just in America, but right now I'm reading. So right now I'm reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Thank you. And this is CCIA, so we like to always throw a book or two at you just to remind you about literacy. And Rodney says that at the time that he written the book, or he terminated his study, which was during the 1950s and 60s, was that Africa had an overabundance of administrative positions, but they didn't have nearly as many productive positions, which involved welding, lumber yards, fisheries, anything that actually related to the modes of production. But there were a lot of bureaucrats they're bureaucrats, basically, a lot of politicians. And we see that, and it's a common trend among any sort of black people in a dependent situation, which we are currently and for several years now, is that there are a lot of black people who have this striver mentality where they go into these political positions of office telling their constituents that they can change and advocate for them within the inside. And we've seen that work in some cases, in some instances, but we've seen it work during Black Reconstruction in America. We've seen it during in certain African nations of independence with we talked about Ture, we talked about Nkrumah, Nyeri. So we've seen it work. Gaddafi, yeah, that'll be for later. We'll save that one. But we've seen that black politicians. I'm claiming Gaddafi. He's black. Black politicians come in and they advocate for African people or their African constituents. And if they are a minority in the situation, which black people are in this country, it doesn't work out the way we want it to. But even still, we see that a lot of black people, the striver class of politicians and bureaucrats, they tend to renege and leech. And that's why, for Nigeria, for an example, not picking on Niger or anything, but the first one to come to mind is that governmental corruption is very big there. And we saw that with the NSARS movement, because it wasn't just the ending of SARS, but it was also the fact that Nigerian politicians were paid an extraordinary amount of money, which rival those of US politicians and European politicians when you break down the average wage of a Nigerian worker and you compare that discrepancy and gap to that of an American worker. So we understand that there's a lot of bureaucracy in among like African people, and understanding that this is a Pan-Africanist subject matter that we're talking about. And we've seen that these African bureaucrats have sold us out continuously. How would Pan-Africanism be used as a tool to then address these striver politicians and sort of regain that, I guess, independence and regain the movement to make sure that Black people become self-sufficient instead of allowing it to be bottlenecked by a handful of Black people hoarding the wealth?
A very big concept to I guess introduce in terms of the contemporary, or rather modern, Pan-African movements going on from the 50s forward. You could introduce the papers that you referenced earlier in terms of Julius K. Nyerere's Ujamaa, or the principles of, or the basis of African socialism, which is that that I guess in the same ways that we talk about socialism or communism in Western sense, is like Marx himself takes indigenous and African societies as a model in order to create, or the ideologies that Marxism entails in terms of everyone, the extended family, working as for the community in order to pull their resources together. Like, one of the main things that he says in there is that one might say that a millionaire is created because of their country's comparative value, but rather than a country's comparative value, it is created because of that country's values. That the millionaire acts as not one who creates his own wealth, or someone might say a billionaire is 1%. It all acts as the same thing, not according to the creation of his own wealth, but the exploitation of workers and those around them, rather than building ourselves in terms of a communal context. So kind of creating an alternative ideology, rather than saying, oh, I am worried about myself as an individualist and a capitalist, to strive for the best material conditions I can provide myself. We provide globally for the people ideas that talk about, oh, I, instead of providing for myself and working to provide for my community, provide for my people in a socialist way. And more than a socialist way, the natural way of being, the African way of being, and providing for our community.
Okay. He had some bass in his voice. You heard me say the African way of being. I was like, go ahead then. Might have got the organs out for a minute. Ooh, okay. So anyone want to respond to that real quick? Or
yeah, so basically everything that Solo said was 100% valid, but I was going to add that I think when when choosing leaders to strive for African liberation, Black people and African people in general have to realize two things. The first is that basically the leaders you choose in striving for this liberation, the leaders you choose in, basically lessening the blow that is put on you by just colonialism and imperialism, is one that these leaders aren't always going to arise in an electoral sense, meaning, your leaders can be just people that like aren't elected officials, because Kwame Ture, he was never an elected official. W.E.B. Du Bois, even just stemming back to the 1800s, like he was never an elected official. So, but these people still had 1900s, but these people still had a heavy effect on just striving for African liberation, putting out ideas there that, you know, Black people have taken and expanded upon, and just, you know, just like bringing the fight on. So one, like, just recognize that not all of your leaders are going to be just up in a political sense, because that just, it's not all that's necessary. But two, if you're going to choose a leader in an electoral sense, you know, through a political just method, that you have to recognize their intentions. Because you mentioned earlier the Reconstruction period, how a lot of leaders arose and how we saw a lot of change happen within, you know, a little decade that we were allowed to. That's because those leaders, they arose straight out of slavery. They weren't really affected by, you know, just this majority white legislature that was telling them, you know, how they should approach their politics, what they should and shouldn't do. And if they were told these things, these leaders weren't listening to anything they were saying. But, you know, if you elect a leader or you choose someone as a leader and they have a real like intention about what they're doing, like they're all about Black liberation rather than advancing their own interests, you can see a lot of change. If you have just who's a good like electoral Black leader that you can think of off the top of your head?
Cori Bush.
So if you have a Cori Bush versus like a Kamala Harris, like it's just like, yeah, the two different like sides of the, like two different completely ends of the spectrum. So.
All right, go ahead then.
You said go ahead. I mean, I asked for a good one, girl. Like,
hey, I was handing it to you, and then you was like, I thought you were gonna choose maybe like Bush or somebody. You was like, nah, Kamala. Like,
versus Kamala. I mean, it's just okay. Recency bias. Like the first one that comes to my head is Kamala. We could think about.
Y'all want to put Howard in something, okay?
I mean, if we are really going to speak about how Howard University has done a much better job at, you know, pushing out these just Black establishment people rather than, you know, like the Black revolutionaries,
CIA agents,
okay.
Number one recruiter of FBR agents coming from the Mecca.
But yeah, piggybacking of what you said, Jody, I feel like the in terms of choosing our leaders, in terms of like, you know, them having a real revolutionary sense, like tying it back to the entire theme of the show, we have, or whoa, wrong side of the screen, right here, the whole idea of like Sankofa.
Hey, what they know about the bird?
We going back and getting it, bro.
Go ahead then.
Going back and getting it. It's our revolutionary leaders. We might even see, like, we can take Du Bois, like you said, Jody. Like, he starts early in his political development in terms of a very flawed, like, you know, context. Like, he's like, oh, I'm advocating for the Talented 10th.
Boy, he was like just so fast in his ideas. That man had different ideas. They would contradict each other.
And then by the end of his life, he's at a point where he's a Pan-Africanist, a socialist, and he's calling for world revolution living in Ghana. And the beautiful thing about that all is that we don't have to wait until we're 95 in order to and have journeys in terms of a political revolution to and to learn that we should be striving for world revolution. We can go back, look at our leaders of the past, and look at their journeys into their own revolutionary ideologies, and look at 18 ourselves, be at the places they were at in 92, 95 years old.
And the thing about Du Bois, I think, is the reasons that a lot of his ideas were real flip-floppy is because, you know, he was one of like the first, right? It's not like he had 200, 300 years of like history to go off to develop these ideas. No, like these were like actively things he was thinking of as he was going along in his life. And thankfully, since like we're the descendants, he's the ancestor now. Like we can go off what he was writing about 200 years ago. We can look at some of the things he said and was like, okay, yeah, but he was kind of tripping here. So yeah, we're gonna ignore that part of what you said, but this part of what you said is really, really, really good. We're gonna go that, and we're gonna expand on that. We're gonna like create new ideas. We're just gonna constantly create and create and create until we find that 100% ideal just ideology we can go off.
Stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and soon we'll be the ancestors that shoulders will be stood upon.
Hopefully. That was beautifully said, fellas. And we spoke about Du Bois and we spoke about Ghana here. And I'm going to bring up Booker T a bit because, I'm just saying, like, if we're going to talk about Du Bois, we have to get Booker T. So basically, like I had mentioned earlier, is that Booker T helped finance a lot of the early Pan-African conferences. And Du Bois was sort of one of the faces of those. And Booker T isn't really a well-known Pan-Africanist, but he surely was. And that should be indicative of the fact that Marcus Garvey saw him as a mentor. So understanding that Marcus Garvey was Jamaican, Booker T was American African, and we sort of see that synergy, they all reside around economic power. And that's just been a recurring theme. Last week, we spoke about political power stemming from economic power. This week, we're talking about the socio-political, cultural phenomenon and ideology of Pan-Africanism. And once again, that has roots in economic self-sufficiency there. And it is Ujamaa Day. So when we get to discuss Pan-Africanism, it's heavily associated with our own economics. And Pan-Africanism and group economics go hand in hand here. But when we take into account that a lot of Pan-African leaders have been deposed, whether they be falsely accused, brought up on mail fraud charges, and
killed.
I mean, I was going to move into that, but yeah,
you put it bluntly.
Yeah, okay. So like Lumumba killed, Sankara killed, but Sankara was different because they all
his moderate self killed.
That was because Solomon said, Du Bois, as he aged with time, his ideology became more revolutionary. So with down. What were you looking at?
Oh, I was signifying going left.
Oh, okay. I was confused. But even with MLK, his ideology became a lot more focused on economics. And then he even sort of stated that he feared he'd led his people into a burning house regarding integration. And I can't wait to speak on integration. So,
what you just talking about in terms of MLK, like what you can say. What was his last speech the day before he died?
Wasn't it why he proposed or I've seen the mountaintop?
Yeah. And people talk about like this in terms of his last speech was precluding or believing that he was going to die soon, but he was actually providing in an hour-long speech an entire way in terms of building Black institutions and economically divesting from whiteness in order to hit their pockets, hit them where it hurts. But it's that's why we as Black people really have to engage and read with our history rather than take our liberal educations as face value. And
honestly, when we're speaking about economic power as African people, what should always be acknowledged is this economic power that white people have built for themselves. They didn't. Well, actually, let me not phrase it like that, because they didn't build it for themselves. We built it for them.
Go ahead.
It was stolen from us. Is
Go
what
ahead.
I'm trying to express. What I'm trying to express is just colonialism.
Go ahead.
Imperialism.
Go ahead.
Africa, as an entire continent being in this seemingly permanent, but it's not permanent because we're going to change it real soon.
Absolutely.
Third world state. How did it become that way? All of the resources just drained from the continent by white people, taken back to Europe, whatever. Just humans as capital, millions and millions and millions of African people taken all over the globe and profited off of. Even intellectual capital in these universities that they've built all over the globe have been at the expense of African people, even our own African universities. Because I wanted to point out the other day that when I was researching the University of Cape Town, what I noticed is their entire historical studies department, it hardly had any Black people in the department. And then when you look at like the entire department, it's just like full of, people that aren't Africans, they're not Black. So even within our own lands today, like they still profiting and just benefiting from, the labor, the intellectual capital of Black people. So even to build it for ourselves, it's a simple task. It's take back what was rightfully ours and stolen from us in the first place, because it's not something that isn't anywhere. It's not something we have to like go and create. It's not something we got to go and pick up. It's not something that like wasn't ever there in the first place. It's something that like basically we just taken back because it's ours, not theirs.
Adding on to what Jody's saying, in terms of this global stronghold that European people had, that they need the exploitation of Africa and Latin America and all these so-called third world countries in order to maintain themselves. In terms of Pan-Africanism revolving around organization and organizing our people in terms of dealing with what our struggles and our purpose is. But before, Nkrumah says that unity proposes organization. And in terms of having to find that unity amongst ourselves, of those in the diaspora and those in, in Africa on the continent, all that, is having to understand that the interests of those that came and established themselves here, white Europeans and so forth, their interests are not our interests. And our interests, whether it be for, Black people in Brazil or Black people in the Americas or in Ghana to South America and so forth, is that there is a common enemy, which is, what white Europeans have built around to subjugate. Yes, in order to colonize and essentially destroy us. And I think in terms of understanding that all of us have been suffering and being subjected to colonization, in turn, like you can see in the major cities in America where our population are and where we reside, is basically a colonial place in which the police officers, they come and they act out on part of the service of, the elites and so forth of the American government to, murder us or, imprison us and so forth. And even back on the continent, you have people who are still taking our land and trying to scam us and putting us into debt and so forth. I think understanding how white Europeans have built a global stronghold of colonizing all of us, and then unifying and seeing that that is the common ground, and that we can put aside all the so forth differences that we have in terms of reaching, organization and then our liberation. I think that's the most important part of trying to understand where we go for here.
That was beautifully said. And I might have been a little bit premature when I said whiteness was our greatest enemy, in the sense that it was more so understanding that race is a social construct and it's the byproduct to be used as a justification for the enslavement and mutilation of Black people, of Africans. So the true enemy of African people everywhere would most definitely be capitalists, in that whiteness is just a facet of capitalism, and that is what racism is. And wow, we really going into this whole economic thing. I'm loving it. All right, right on. So understanding that capitalism is one of the main perpetrators of exploitation upon African people, and in the spirit of Ujamaa here, how do we sort of energize Black people in the contemporary society to move away from, because we're all in America right now, and we all understand that we have the luxury of having a very high standard of living compared to a lot of our kinfolk around the diaspora and around the world, and it can be a hard pill to swallow to acknowledge that our status as Americans lead to the oppression and deaths of our African people around the world. So, with that in mind, how can we sort of energize Africans within America as well as within the Western nations? So, if you're Black in Canada, I don't know how you got up there, but still, if you're like, if you're African in the UK, you're African in France or Italy or something like that, you are in a nation that is benefiting from the oppression of Black people in the continent as well as in the South American region and the West Indies. So, how can we energize Africans in these Western nations to understand our position and use our positioning as a way to pour back into Africans who are continental or islanders, so that we can move towards that African independence and self-determination that we all want to see and speak of, so that we can break the grasp that capitalists have upon us?
I would say that first we truly have to understand that what we're talking about is not a short-term, sort of like sweeping and instantly gratifying sort of process where
Absolutely. The show is 2050 and beyond.
Yeah. So suddenly like everyone is going to be it's right, yeah. But it's sort of that we all as ourselves, no matter what role we have in society, whether we become an engineer, a biologist, a chemist, rocket scientist, we have to understand that first of all, our duty is foremost to the people, no matter like what position we are, and all of ourselves before like anything, we all have to individually become educators, which means outreaching to our community, tapping in with our local community organizations, distributing our ideology to friends and family members, and then as a slow gradual process, everyone radicalizing everyone in terms of everyone, each one teach one, everyone according to their knowledge, educate who they can, and above all, that comes with creating our minds in the molds of becoming Afrocentric, Pan-Africanist, creating like rather than white-minded people, African-minded people, as creating sort of antitheticals to the realities that we face, like rather than ingraining capitalism in our children's minds, ingraining cooperative economics instead of individualism, collectivism, sort of just like counterbalancing all the propaganda that they're fed daily, help ourselves. Like even the way that we discuss Pan-Africanism in and of itself, it all like lends itself to the centrism of white domination. Like you could trace back Pan-Africanism in and of itself, if we're talking about a real Afrocentric sense of Pan-Africanism, to the 3200 BC in terms of Pharaoh Narmer uniting Upper and Lower Kemet to resist invaders from other continents. So
I want to get into that real quick. I'm glad you brought that up because if you want to go back all the way to Kemet, right? So you mentioned 3200 BC, and then 3100 BC, King Menes, another great, and he united what was you said Upper and Lower Egypt, not in the traditional sense of what the nation Egypt is, but what the empire of Egypt, ancient Egypt, was, which expanded all the way to the Mediterranean, down to the Indian Ocean, sweeping the eastern coast.
Menes is Narmer. The Greeks renamed Narmer to Menes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah. And not only did he do that in a sense, but just like you were tracking. So when it comes to understanding our lineage too, right? Because a lot of the time we use white standpoints to sort of understand our own blackness.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of being African is more so a white ideology. It's a white term because Africa is huge, and you can't really, basically, an Ethiopian wasn't thinking about what someone in Zululand was doing because that's worlds apart. And then when you take into account that the Sahara is the size of the continental US, you can't really expect. So we understand. So we understand that even the term African is fairly recent, and it was created to generalize a people who are extremely diverse. But we're able to turn that into cultural energy and as well as our own self identity. So that reclamation there, and I'm glad that you brought up King Menes and just ancient Egypt and or Kemet, which means land of the blacks, and which is what Sudan means as well. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead. See, on it. Together, unity.
Does anyone remember what the term just the ancient Africans used for like black people? Because you mentioned that it wasn't Africa. Do you remember what the term was that they used or not?
Put me on the spot like that. Okay, cool.
Does anyone remember? Because they can answer too. It's not just
because it's like so we know a lot about Egypt, and Egyptians, they just was like, yeah, I'm from Kemet, and then that was good enough. And but to like discuss what ancient black people use, because it was all different, because the dialects also.
It said there was a I did just Google search it, so
but okay,
it's cool as long as we got the information here. It's all good.
It said I believe the first name that was used in terms of like I wouldn't say international because those international borders were created by the Berlin Conference, but the historian Sheikh Anta Diop, who also I could tie him in later.
Go ahead.
Great Senegalese.
Where's he from? There it is.
Great Senegalese,
all the way up.
Who also says, which ties into like my Afrocentric analysis of Pan-Africanism. He says that Africans should use like why not Africans use Kemet as a classical civilization in the same way that the Europeans use the Greeks and the Romans as classical civilizations. But his he says the first name for Africa used was Alkebulan, which means mother of mankind or garden of Eden. And it was used by Moors, Nubians, Numidians, and Carthaginians.
He went out and commented it himself.
Absolutely.
Shout out Senegal.
All my people in Senegal.
Add on, I was using that term generalization of Africans to help us in our struggle of unity. I think you can use that. Like, say there's African people, and you have African people in Ghana and Nigeria, and within those subsections you have Yoruba, Ashanti, and Ewe people. And I think if you use that context in the terms of the diaspora, saying you have African people, you have Black Americans, and you have Black people in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, because all of them are culturally different in terms of their history and how they got there, how they had to maintain themselves. So I think, Malcolm X was talking of trying to return to Africa, not physically, but philosophically and culturally, and that we are very communal people. And I think that can really help us in terms of understanding what we need to do within one another. And when you start seeing each other on the continent, the diaspora, as different ethnic groups, and under this umbrella of being African people, I think that generalization has momentum to truly help us in terms of our progression if it is utilized, in a great way.
Absolutely, man. Like, just because we're talking about that general like African identity and that reclamation of it. No. So it appears that
they got to Hoover. I'm telling you.
Yeah, dog. We gotta
got him.
Oh man, like they busted his house. He tried to turn everything off. Last thing we heard was no. And you see the flicking, right?
Hmm?
You see the flicking too, right? The flashing.
I know. I keep seeing that. I'm like, they're honest.
They recording us.
Hey,
Kids,
worried about it.
we actually want to become politicians, establishment. Oh god.
I support all African. No. But but really, it's a segue because we talked about decolonization here, and a lot of people have a really abstract idea of it where it's just like, oh, okay, cool. So Europe left Africa, which they didn't, and then a lot of African people were sort of left to their own devices, and they never got it together. But it's this idea that the same can be said about any colonized group, is that decolonization is also a mental process as well. And as much as it pains me to say this, integration was a huge impediment to the decolonization process because we have a lot of people, a lot of Black people growing up in these predominantly white environments, learning this whitewashed history, and they seem to think lesser of themselves. And it's been done by numerous Black psychologists that have shown that integration leaves a lot of Black people with psychological issues and stress. And if you grow up in a predominantly white space as a Black person, you will face high amounts of stress later in life. So we see that Pan-Africanism is a generalized identity or an ideology, and we see that working closely in relation with these white capitalist spaces, they serve to harm Black people and impede that growing Pan-Africanist sentiment that we have here. And we understand that this is a gradual process that starts with the person, until, like Solomon said, each one teach one. So it's a single person, which then it's the family unit, then it's the community, then it's the nation. And one of my last questions here is, how do we get Black people, no matter where they are in the diaspora, to understand that their African identity, their Black identity, is something that should be cherished and shared with other people, and not in the sense of what that arbitrary nation boundary, because borders don't exist, that arbitrary nation state dictates, but an actual African identity that sort of transcends what the Berlin Conference wants of them. How do we get, and also just sort of like what American, like chattel slavery did to Black people, because a lot of Black people seem to be taking extreme and excessive pride and nativism in being a descendant of American slavery. And there's no shame in that because our ancestors were still strong, but my lineage does not start in shacklehood, nor did my people ever become fully enshackled. We fought back at every point, and that is a huge staple that we want to say here on the show. But back to the main programming. How do we get African people to just sort of start understanding their Blackness and their African identity as something that is to be shared with other Africans?
You were just saying that decolonization is like a big process, like, and even on a personal level, before like you talk about the community, the family unit, the nation, you have to talk about the multiple levels on which a person himself has to be decolonized. It's like your economics, it's your ideology, your logic, your physical being, and even deeper than that, it's your spirituality. Because before I'm not saying that the Abrahamic religions are necessarily inherently evil, but what I am saying is that a lot of native spiritualities were taken and supplanted with Christianity, and before that, Arabs from North Africa supplanted with Islam. But you know, it's like on multiple levels, you have to understand that Africans and the ideologies and practices that come from Africans are valuable and cherished. That's just what I'm saying.
Absolutely, brother. Welcome back, Jody. We thought the worst had happened to you.
Jerry, we didn't get you, bro.
No, they didn't get me this time. They tried, but they couldn't.
He put on the Haitian flag, and they was like, absolutely not. So did you hear that, or Foley? You got something to say? So we give Jody some time to catch up.
I was gonna add on to what you're saying about how decolonization really is a mental process and how integration essentially creates this two-way street of, you know, you have Black people in their own community thinking that the only way they can advance and move and become better is to go into this white community, right? Because they have all the better resources, they have all the better stuff, and they don't really understand that they have that because they got it from exploiting you and your community. And even back on the continent, you have all these people who are always talking about, um, migrating from home to go to these European countries and, to America and for promises of a better life, but they got that off exploiting you. And it's this not really having understanding of the value of not only yourself and your people, but or not even your land, because I think in terms of us is our community is not where we are, is where our people are, and everywhere we go we always gravitate towards our people. But if you don't really have that understanding of value of your own self or your own people, then you're never truly going to progress in the way you want to, because you'll spend your whole life chasing after having a seat at the table and hoping these white people like me and, hoping they accept me. And no matter how hard you try, you will never be fulfilled. So having, I think education plays a big role in, developing the consciousness of the people. But, you know, when you're living in places that you have these liberal education and your history is, watered down, and Black children are discarded, and they're not really cared for. you, I think having that understanding of wanting to do better for not only yourself or your family or those in your community or around you, but making sure that they understand that unless you have that self-worth and that love of yourself and for your people, nothing is going to happen. So education and self-love, I think, plays a big role in terms of developing ourselves.
Yeah. Fully cut right to the chase. I don't know exactly what the entire conversation is about. I see that the topic is surrounding integration. So
No.
no,
No,
because that's kind of what it is. Kind of what the
we're gonna slander integration a little bit, but more so like, how do we foster understanding and affirming a Black African identity within people? And we spoke about how integration had sort of stalled that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's it. Just fostering self-love for Blackness.
So, basically, the way I'm going to go about this then is I'm going to present a contrast, right?
Okay.
When you're a Black person going into a white space, the first thing you're going to realize is that white people don't acknowledge what they have, and what they especially don't acknowledge is how they got to that point. They don't acknowledge what they have, and they especially don't acknowledge what the other people like that are surrounding their little bubbles, because they live in bubbles. They don't acknowledge what they do not have. So I think to foster an understanding of Black people, the Black diaspora, Blackness, and everything in between is to make sure that you acknowledge that your Blackness, first of all, is your identity, and it's a good identity. It's not a bad identity to have, because a lot of what those Black integrationists, a lot of what those Black people in the white spaces, especially when they just develop these like psychological strife, is that they are led to believe that their Blackness is inferior. They're led to believe that their Black skin, and just every Black person's Black skin, is what led to them, being in this kind of just suppressed state where, we're not allowed this economic freedom, we're not allowed this academic freedom, we're not allowed this political freedom. They think it's because of our Blackness. No, that's because of whiteness. So if you establish that understanding first, because then people will see, like, people will start to love themselves when they realize that. Once you establish that, then you can start to establish the sense of resistance among people. Okay, it's like whiteness caused all of this. Whiteness caused all of the, like, this pain in my community. It's just destabilized entire continents, held down entire populations. Okay, yeah, I don't like this situation. I don't want to stay in this situation. What we're going to do is fight against this situation because I don't want this life for my kids. I don't want this situation for my kids. I don't want that for my grandkids. And I don't want that for any of my descendants. You start to, like, just, I don't know, like Solo was saying earlier, you radicalize an entire population through education. Just let these people know who they are. Let these people realize why they should be proud of who they are. And just tell them that they shouldn't let anybody else think, like, let them think otherwise. Because, you know, like, we black.
Absolutely, brother.
There was a scene on one of my favorite shows, Random Acts of Flyness. Everyone should watch that. Yeah, I'm not saying no one under 18 though, because I'm not trying to recommend for parents to let their children watch that. No. But there was a scene that's very important. Is on episode 2, there was a part where the creator of the show, Terrence Nance, who was also a character, he got an email from his friend and saying that we should make our art rather than to address whiteness, but to affirm blackness. And that's, like, you know, a perfect statement to what, you know, Jody was saying. Like, we need to teach ourselves that you know, we have value. We're not necessarily saying that, oh, we are people, we have value, we have a rich culture and history. We're not saying that we are the descendants of kings and queens. We don't have that. We have value because we are people, and those people that we come from have culture, and their cultural institutions, their spiritual institutions, political and economic institutions, they all have value, and we also do as African people. An important also distinction that to make is that when we say that whiteness has created every issue that we have, we are not talking about a great culling of all white people. We're saying that whiteness and white people are two completely separate things. And I think, like, Jody, Jaimir, if any of you wanted to address that, like,
yeah. So when we say whiteness, we're not calling for the like harm or violence against anybody just for the sake of their phenotype. You know, we're more so talking to the perceived superiority that whiteness, Europe, the West, capitalists entail, and that allows them to believe they can get away with the mutilation, harm, oppression, and overall exploitation of Black people, as well as people of color, and understanding that we're all human and that we're all just trying to make it out here. We don't wish any harm on anybody. That is very clear. We don't wish harm on white people, Afro pessimists, nothing. We just sitting here trying to make it on our own and push through and affirm Blackness in the best way that we can. So that right there is what we're trying to do here.
Love Black people.
Absolutely. And, you know, we love everybody as long as Malcolm said it best. We're nonviolent with everyone who's nonviolent with us. And we'll leave it like that. So if your whiteness is nonviolent, then, you know, cool, bro. Like, but if it's the type that goes out and blows up a city block in Nashville on Christmas Day, then, you know, you might have to, you know, figure some stuff out for yourself. But a lot of people aren't talking about the Nashville suicide bomber. And if you don't know about that, then we suggest that you sort of do a little bit of research on that yourself, because the city of Nashville was the scene of a great trauma on Christmas Day, and we send a lot of love and support to everyone out there in Nashville as well as Kentucky and just in the area. A lot of pouring out. I know that community is hurting, and, you know, we really have to get a handle on these domestic terrorists. So with that being said, we want to thank Foley, want to thank Solomon, Jody as well for coming out, fellowshipping with us. I didn't do this last week. So that's on me because I was just so excited. I was just a happy and a smiling. And it's basically welcome to the Council of Scholars, our Mbangi Goodfellas. That one's gonna stick with me. I'm really vibing with that one. We said we were trying to get back to that African ideology, and why not use Mbangi for that? So any words, fellas, before we gotta skedaddle a bit. No words.
Thank you. Just thank you for
all of us here. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it, especially talking to you guys. I appreciate what you have done, Jameer, and I appreciate, being friends with you guys and meeting you guys and having discussion and such. So thank you.
I love that we all are able to, come together on this platform. It's, all love, all community for Black people, talking about how we can love ourselves better and advance ourselves better. And I'm just love coming out here for the second time with my brothers and speaking on some things, Y'all are my brothers. So thank you.
That really makes me tear up. And so we're gonna let you guys go. Joe, do you have anything to say to the brothers before we go? Just
muted me in the middle of my sentence. I'm gonna say that I really appreciated my time here with my brothers today, Solomon, Brooks, and Foley Quavy. It was interesting talking to you guys, like it is always and like it is every day. I have a lot of respect for y'all. Y'all are my guys. I can't wait until next August when I can hit campus and we could browse founders together, hit LOC. Allegedly. No, we gonna back soon. No, we go. I don't care.
Okay. We'll talk.
Love y'all though.
Much love, man. You guys be safe out there, Oh man. So I'm about to wrap things up a little bit. So Jody, I thank you for being on the show with us tonight, brother. You always come through. And I'm about to get up into this wrap up a bit. You be safe and make sure that nobody comes and sort of gets you for anything you said about Haiti or anything like that. So thank you guys for being here with us. This has been again another week, another great week. We kicked off Pan-Africanism a bit. We talked about the historical context. We always like to contextualize a little bit things, and we sort of pondered where we would go as a people when it came to a Pan-Africanist ideology. We spoke about the group economics of it, and we touched on socialism, scientific socialism, if you want to be specific, as well as communalism. And we also want to talk about decolonizing ourselves and our ideologies, which is why I wanted to end tonight's show a little bit differently, not with a word from me sending you guys out, but with a word again from Shania, because we did talk about affirming ourselves. So this is how we're going to leave, in the middle of Kwanzaa as well, just to give you guys that extra push and to let you know it's all right to be Black. You are fantastic, beautiful, and amazing. And I just wish you all a good night. Peace.
Greetings, virtual villagers. My name is Shania, and do you know what time it is? It's affirmation time! Time to remind ourselves how great we are. So everybody, repeat after me. I am smart. I have purpose. I am confident. I am valuable. My voice is worthy of being heard. I am an asset to my family, school, and community. I respect myself and I respect others. I am beautifully made inside and out. I love my beautiful hair and I love my beautiful brown skin. I am more than enough. Great job, virtual villagers! Can I get a virtual high five? Great job! And always remember how fantastic you are